We would now start the next session on emerging technologies and cloud transformation as lever for business excellence. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce the eminent personalities who would join us in the session. Let's give them a warm and enthusiastic welcome. I would like to request the session moderator, Mr. Sanjoy Sen, Co-Chairman, CII Eastern Region ICT Task Force. Please come up on the dais. Now may I request Mr. Nachiket Saktanka, Senior Vice President, Global Delivery Network Lead and Managing Director, India, DXC Technology, to kindly join us on the dais. Let me now request Mr. Sridhara Srinivasulu Narayanaswamy, Head, Innovation Centers, Center of Excellence, Cloud Engineering, Japan and Asia Pacific, Oracle, to come up on the dais. Now I would request Mr. Trideb Roy, Director, Public Sector, Cisco India and SARC. Welcome Mr. Roy, requesting you to please join us on the dais. I would now request Mr. Otoki Ogura, Head of Engineering, Global Business Department, Fujisoft Incorporated Japan, to kindly join us on the dais. Mr. Ogura, thank you for traveling from Japan to join us today. Welcome to Kolkata, the city of joy. We are privileged to have Mr. Prosenjit Roy, Chief Marketing Officer, NTT Limited, India. May I request you to kindly join us on the dais. I would now welcome on the dais Mr. Rahul Singh, Vice President, Head of Marketing, SAP Indian Subcontinent. Over to you, Mr. Sen, for taking forward the discussions of the session.
We can start. Good afternoon. The morning just passed by. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on emerging technologies and cloud transformation as lever for business excellence. Business excellence, or you sustain or perish. When technology comes and knocks at your door, you don't know from which angle the competition will come. There are enough and more examples in hospitality, education, automotive, and the entire delivery of services or goods are redefined by these emerging technologies. New business paradigms are being created every day. And cloud is a way of life now. In Easter years when we started, we used to store our data in floppy drives. Then we migrated to pen drives. We migrated to external drives. Today, monthly we pay our electric bill. We also pay for Google Drive and iCloud. So cloud has become a way of life. It's nothing different now. And it's an irreversible, irreplaceable process. However, there are challenges. Is everything good and exciting about cloud? We will find it out. Now, doing business is becoming more and more different with ESG coming in, with data protection bill coming in. People need to be more agile and nimble. And how does all these things work? How one delivers business excellence? Technology is not that you have a choice. It's a mandate. And it's again a mandatory thing to survive. We have a list of very eminent panelists today. Mr. Nachiket Shutanankar from DXC Technology, Mr. Sridhara from Oracle, Trideep from Cisco, Mr. Otoki Oguwara from Fujitsu, he has come all the way from Japan, Proshanjit from NTT, and Rahul from SAP. I will first start with Nachiket. Now, technology is changing at a very fast pace. People doesn't have a choice, but all technologies needs to be adopted. Will they deliver? I would like to have your views.
Thanks, Sanjoy, and good morning, everybody. I think you need to take a step back in terms of the way technology is impacting all of us, right? We've always had technology hitting us, and I would think the earliest form of technology would be James Watt and the steam engine, which started sometime in 1750, and that started off the entire wave of the Industrial Revolution, right? And then you had electricity, and you had transistors, and you had television, you had mainframes, you had a bunch of things, client server, and SAP grew up on the back of that, right? But what's happening now is, these waves used to happen once in 100 years, once in 50 years, once in 30 years, etc. But in the last 15 years, if you've seen, these waves have come very, very quickly, right? So all of a sudden, you've got cloud, of course, which is one of the topics here. But you've got AR, VR, you've got the metaverse, you've got high-speed networking, you've got the web and the content on the web. All these waves are happening in a very short period of time. So that's the first sort of interesting technology evolution that we are seeing. The number of waves coming in a very short period of time. The second impact of technology is really in terms of adoption. I mean, even though the electricity and the internal combustion engine came in, every technology goes through an S-curve in terms of an adoption life cycle. So it starts off slowly, and then there's an inflection point where suddenly it picks up, and then it eventually either dies out or gets replaced by something else, right? And again, there was a gradual process. It took many years for electricity to become mainstream, many years for television. I mean, remember, television started in the West in 1950s or so, but the first television came to India in the 70s and color television in the 80s, right? But it was like a 50-year adoption cycle. If you see what's happening today, that adoption S-curve is very, very instant and very steep. So you look at Facebook. To get to 100 million users, it took 4.5 years. WhatsApp, 3.5 years. Insta, 2.5 years. ChatGPT took 2.5 months to get to 100 million users, right? So that's the second sort of impact in terms of technology trend. One is, of course, the number of waves. The second is how quickly they're getting adopted. The third is the cost of technology and access to technology is going down significantly. I mean, you don't need to be a Bell Labs or to have multi-billion-dollar R&D budgets to access these technologies. If you look at the cost of genome sequencing, right, which is one of the big things, genetic engineering is a big thing, right? 2007, it was $1 million. 2016, it was $1,000. Today, it's available for $200. Right? If you look at all the cost curves on a logarithmic scale for cost of data, cost of storage, cost of computing, cost of network, speeds, and access, all the logarithmic graphs are straight lines coming down. Right? So the cost and access to technology is dropping significantly. And these three phenomena, one is the number of waves, technology waves, the adoption and the reduction in cost, I think is causing a convergence which is unique. Right? And that's the real opportunity of the business. Any technology by itself has a significant impact. But these technologies all evolving and maturing together, the impact is exponential. I think as business leaders, that's the one thing you have to take into consideration, that not only is this era different from whatever we've seen in the past, but I think more importantly, more and more of such waves are going to hit us even before the old wave has matured and been adopted completely, right? And you don't need to look at industrial examples in terms of the impact. I mean, I'll give you a simple example of groceries. I mean, of course, Instamart and Swiggy and everything else. But, my local grocer in COVID used to send my wife a list of vegetables on WhatsApp. She used to place the order. His mother used to clean and deliver the vegetables, and we used to transfer the money into his bank account, right? This is not a VC-funded startup. This is a neighborhood grocer. And, you can see if that grocer can take advantage of technology and transform their entire business model, it's very clear that, the opportunity exists for every one of us here. We need to recognize the combinatorial effects and the convergence of technologies, and then figure out what's the right answer for our company. So again, right, I mean, for me, this is a very, very exciting area. Every challenge is an opportunity, and I think every business has the ability to really, really change how they interact with their customers, their employees, and also what kind of products they deliver. So Sanjoy, that's my perspective.
Just to sum up, there's opportunity for everyone. Technology is at disposal. Speed of adoptions is very, very high, and the cost curve is coming down. I'll come back to you, Nachiket. I'll like to go to Sridhar. Sridhar, no discussion on emerging technology is complete without talking of LLM. I'd like to hear your views on that. And I have a question on LLM. Today, LLM is on English language. Are there any roadmaps on natural language? Because once we have it on natural language, that's where the thing will become commodity. Your views, please.
Thanks, Mr. Sanjay sir. And once again, distinguished panel members and all the people who are there in this forum. So just to give an introduction of myself, I'm in the product development for 33 years. And my career started with mainframe, and then I was working in IT management, product development, and then storage, then networking, and then after that, going into printing, 3D printing, and then I joined Oracle 6 years back. Predominantly worked on cloud technologies for the last 10 years. But what most important thing is, being in this context of technology and emerging technology changes, one of the things happens is, how do you really adapt to that? That's a key part of it. And the biggest challenge is when we start looking at it. I was involved in writing the second generation protocol, web services protocol 10 years back, around 2008, 9, 10. At that time, we never thought the biggest challenge was in emerging technologies was integration. And we wanted to see how the heterogeneous applications, products under the different layers works actually. Today, these web services protocols actually addresses more than 50 to 60 million Java and .NET developers. They use that technology. Now, last 6 to 7 years, when I was working, I do have several patents, and one of the things which Sanjay sir was talking about, LLMs. 2016, one of the important factors was the data. What is digital data and how we can actually leverage the data. I think the previous discussion was about the cost. What can we really impact? Because most importantly, the cost makes a difference for the CIOs. And in this forum, I think I understand a lot of manufacturing companies are there, and how does really that impact? So I actually filed one of the disclosures, which was particularly on the summarization. Like, you do a search, and any content which generates, basically we do a summarization of it. And last year, February, it got approved. And as Nachiket sir said about in terms of how the technology changes, and especially OpenAI, the way what it got in the GPT, right, the current context, this patent was approved, which basically makes a lot of difference in the generative AI scenarios. So coming back to this technology, I also sit in two forums. One is on the G20 GPAI, that is Global Partnership of AI. I'm a part of IT Ministry team with Prime Minister's Office. And the second one is about India AI, Future Labs, which we have submitted a blueprint for the next 5 years, what India should work on the labs. Basically, what type of infrastructure we should have it in terms of public-private partnership. So coming back to the basic question about what is LLM, and so I do work day in, day out on this development, and let me throw some insights on this. The first challenge comes in is about the data, because end of the day, as CIOs, you have cross LOBs, different line of businesses if you are running a big companies. And the big challenge comes in is how do you really understand what is happening in each of the organization. So one is the learning process of this data. So it can become more a static information because the data is existing. It might change at some point of time. How do you really address that? So that's one of the most important factor. So deep learning techniques, such as in terms of neural networks, it always reflects the human behavioral aspects of what we are doing today. If I go and read a book, I memorize to some extent, then I keep reading the second time the book, might be I will understand more about it. The third time might be I'll even be able to quote few things from the book. Similarly, the neural networks versus a perceptron, which is basically a first layer of neural networks, which understands about what these nodes are, which is basically anything you talk about large language models or mathematical models. Today, all of them are mathematics. So throughout my career, from the last, I would say, 2 decades, whether you work in storage, you work in networking, you work in printing, 3D printing, and now you come into the cloud, it's all about mathematics. So when we talk about this part of LLMs, the most important challenge comes in is how do you relearn the data and make it more precise? Like for example, OpenAI has got 175 billion parameters. So what does really parameters means there? How does it really reflect that when you come into localization? For example, here in India, being a part of this committee, we have 143 languages. And the biggest challenge comes in is if I have it in English and I translate it on the fly, and how does it really impact to a normal person in different regions? It's not easy to do that. So there are several platforms. So one of the platform which the government has taken the initiative is about Bhashini, which is basically has several different language data sets. So one of the factors comes in is how do you take the language data sets and you have the data and then you do the kind of a translation to localization. That becomes a big challenge. The second is what does really generative AI means for me, for the CIOs. So you do have multiple LOBs and you would like to see millions of different transactions happening. So if I go talk to a developer and say, I'm saving a transaction %, and then I go to a CIO and say, I'm saving a transaction %, the CIO will get excited because per day you are running like million transactions. That means a million of cents you are saving in this context. So what this summarization means is taking the entire set of data, summarizing and giving you a meaningful outcome about what decision-making you can do that. There are 2 types of decision-making capabilities which comes in. The same thing which comes in the localization. That is, one is a prescriptive analysis. That means based on the current event, like such as COVID and other things, pandemic scenarios, what is an impact and what can you really do that? Another is predictive analysis. Predictive analysis is very, very challenging because end of the day, what is the accuracy you're looking at? Is it 50, 60, 70, 80, 90? It depends upon the digital data. I think the last, yesterday also, there were a lot of discussion happening. How are we ready with the digital data? Because if you're not ready with the digital data, definitely the LLMs will not function the way it should function because it is very expensive. So let me give one more example about how localization is very important. So you might have heard about ONDC, that is Open Network Digital Commerce, which is such a good platform which we have started with. There is no third-party integration in terms of the mediators like Flipkart or Walmart, anything like that. It directly allows the merchant, the B2B or B2C, to work directly, and then it gives you a kind of an exponential impact in terms of bringing the value. So looking at that, if you don't have a localization models, that means the local applications are not running in Hindi, Bengal, or any of those languages. It becomes a big bottleneck. So I will go into more details about some of this in a mathematical way, which I'll explain to you, might be in the next question, which is coming up, in terms of how effective it is for the CIOs, because the correlation of this is more important in terms of industries, because each of them, like you take any industries, you take manufacturing industry, you take hospitality industry, you take finance industry, you take insurance, you take anything. The bottom line is there is some fabric which actually goes across this, which will be a very commonality, that is the data. And how this data can be actually manipulated by the CIOs in terms of making the decisions, which will be a kind of a game changers. And this technology definitely is required. Based on the statistics of $1.65 trillion of opportunity the CIOs have in the next 5 years in this technology.
Thanks, Sridhar. So data readiness is a very important factor, and also localization. These are the two things that will really benefit and take it to the next level. Another thing is also, when you're going for LLM, you need huge amount of resources. Now, question was that, will those resources be in India or not? Today, all those things, if you see, we have a lot of agreements being signed last month. Okay, how these type of CPUs can be brought to India. I think those things are which will take you to the next level of LLM. Now, coming back to private sector, this G20, India demonstrated its digital capability. In fact, there were a lot of appreciation globally on the way India has moved into its digital journey. And obviously, private sectors are not far behind that. I will request Trideep to kindly elaborate on how private sectors are gearing up and how they are using this emerging technology to redefine their business excellence.
Thanks, Sanjay. My name is Trideep, and I work for Cisco, and I take care of one of the 4 segments within Cisco, which is called public sector. Other than this, we have enterprise, mid-size, and small business. And incidentally, somebody was talking about small business. Within Cisco, the small business is actually the fastest growing segment. It's 45,000 accounts. Now, speaking of G20, I think G20 was an incredible showcase, for the country. Those 2 days were just a window into India in terms of digital transformation, but a lot goes on behind, what happened in those 2 days. And I just want to leave all of you with few pointers. I don't know if you know that India is the most digitized country in the world, Last I saw 1.32 billion people on Aadhaar. And I'll give you some personal examples of, what is mean for citizens, the common citizens like us. We have, DigiLocker, which is being exclusively used by, citizens of the country. We have, I think, close to 1.5 lakh grams of villages connected through broadband. So it's the most digitized country in the world, and that's what I think G20 showcased. How this digital transformation is happening. But let me give you an example from the government's perspective. I think what government is looking at is this inclusion. The connectivity, security, and then obviously visibility into this entire infrastructure that the government has built for its citizen services. I have just a small personal example. I have a young daughter who studies in England, and when she went sometimes back in the initial days, my wife and we were having this chat, and my wife asked my daughter that what is that you miss the most, and she was hoping that she'll say maa ke haath ka khana, but she said Paytm. And it is so common in India to use these digital tools to make payment, and this only happens because of inclusion. eKYC is one such example where you can open a bank account in India on your phone in 5 to 6 minutes with by doing digital verification, your address verification and authentication and your signature. It takes 3 weeks to open a bank account in one of the European countries because they can't validate your address digitally. and authenticate it where you are, because they have to send you a physical OTP and then do a location-based lock. So, but these are few of the examples. But the amount of budget that's going to pumped in this digital inclusion and digital transformation is incredible. Within Cisco, we have these various measures of looking at the market. The government TAM by Cisco standard is about $550 million, but it doesn't count for some of these transformational projects like BharatNet. 1,39,000 crores is going to get spent. It's already been approved by the government. It's going to bring 6.5 lakhs villages into connectivity. E-judicial services just got the cabinet note of 7,200 crore. Again, the entire judicial system is going to be hybrid. We will have records, digitized, and judgment, on video conferencing. So these are some of the transformational project that's happening, which is actually sort of pushing India into this forefront of digital transformation in the world, and that's what gets showcased in these G20 kind of event. So there's, I think, incredible amount of change is happening in last 10, 15 years. And the recession may come and recession may go, but this is not going to stop. This digital transformation is going to stay here for good and for the citizens of the country. Thanks.
Thanks, Tridip. The infrastructure, the identification, the UPI, all those things that has been created are here to stay, and businesses will use these types of digital tools to enhance their own businesses. Now we have Mr. Otakai from Japan. He has come all the way from Japan. We will like to hear from him how Japanese companies are using technology to transform themselves.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mr. Sen, from the introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you are aware, Japan is known for its rich history of technological innovation. And it also deeply involved in adoption and integration of emerging technology into organizational digital journeys. Society 5.0, Japanese concept of Society 5.0 envisions society where technologies, including AI and IoT, is seamlessly integrated into everyday life to solve societal challenges. This vision is driving digital transformation efforts across various sectors. Some of the areas that I can think of right now were, number one, automation and robotics. We have a strong tradition of robotics. And companies across Japan continuing to invest heavily in the field. Emerging technology like advanced robotics and automation being used in manufacturing, healthcare, and logistics to improve efficiency and reduce labor costs. Number two, artificial intelligence. AI is being employed for various purposes, from customer service chatbot to predictive maintenance in manufacturing. A Japanese company developed a system that understands the nuance of the Japanese language and culture, making them particularly effective for domestic makers. Yeah. Number three, IoT and smart manufacturing. The Internet of Things is integral to Japanese vision of Industry 4.0. Manufacturers are using IoT sensors to monitor equipment, optimize production process, and reduce downtime. This approach aligns with Japanese focus on high-quality manufacturing. Number four, 5G connectivity. Japan has been early adopter of 5G technology, which is crucial of enabling high-speed, low-latency connection. Its various industries include autonomous vehicles, healthcare, and smart cities. Lastly, digital health. Japan is facing challenges related to an aging population, and emerging technology are being used to develop digital health solutions. Yeah, in conclusion, Japanese concept of Society 5.0 will be help us for more understanding of emerging technologies and cloud transformations. So the Japanese government, academia, and industry leaders actively working together to harness the potential of those technologies for the nation economic growth and societal well-being. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. So we understand that you are really using the technologies, AI, IoT, robotics, and also high-speed connectivity for both societal as well as industrial benefits. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'd like to ask Prashanjit. Prashanjit represents NTT. In fact, today's newspaper covers a lot of good news about NTT opening the data center here. What are the innovations that NTT is looking at, Prashanjit, if you can?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Sanjay. Good afternoon. It's very rare that you have two Japanese companies on a panel, okay? I've been speaking for so many years, I've not seen it, so maybe it's a rare occasion today. So NTT's commitment to staying at the forefront of technology is underscored by our robust research and development activities. In fact, NTT, one of the very few companies in the world, we invest $3.6 billion annually in research and development work. Our team of scientists, engineers, technologists, which is numbering around 5,000, continuously push the boundaries of what we can do, okay, and come up with novel solutions and that anticipate the future market trends, okay, and the needs. And I think as a fallout of this, what has happened is the NTT research and development team, they have around 19,000 patents as of now. And per year, we publish around 2,400 research papers, okay? So you can imagine the trend on the innovation that we work on. And this dedication to innovation ensures that our clients have the most advanced, the frontline solutions that is available in the marketplace. I'll talk about 2-3 examples of what we are working on, and which is very fascinating. One of them is called IOWN, okay, which is Innovative Optical and Wireless Networks. This is a concept which is proposed by NTT to ensure that we realize the new smart societies which we can't do in today's internet. So the network and information processing, okay, the infrastructure can provide very high speed, okay, very high capacity communications using optics as well as very high transformational capacities in production. The all photonics networks we are talking about here, they leverages optical technologies at all levels. So starting from your networks to devices to including inside the chips, okay? And that can enable a very high low power consumption, a very high speed processing power, okay? So which is not available in today's world, okay? Hopefully with IOWN, we can bring that revolution. The other one I want to talk about is something which NTT is working on is a solar, space solar power system. It's a technology by which what we are planning to do is we are trying to convert the solar energy out there and bring it to Earth, okay? Now how we do this is basically we ensure that the solar energy entity will use technologies to convert the solar energy into lasers and bring it to the Earth, okay? And we can use this through converting this into lasers or microwaves. We use this through geosynchronized satellite orbits, which we have, and we ensure they come straight to the Earth without any fluctuation or diffraction because of this, the atmospheric turbulence. There are a lot of benefits to this. We can create a electrical power system out of this, which basically can drive autonomous vehicles, drones, and automobiles. It can be used through a microgrid. This can also be used for generating power for islands or evacuation centers when there is any disaster that strikes. Okay? So how do you convert solar energy back to Earth and derive mileage out of it? And the third one that we are doing is basically a digital twin for health, where we use the innovative concept from entities, medical and health vision. They analyze the predictive future mental state of human beings and also about how diseases are going to unfold. So entity is working on this particular digital twin computing over the years, okay? And we will develop a detailed mapping of the person's mind and body. I think through this, we can predict the future of the physical and mental state of each person, contributing to the personalized medical care and help in maintain health and the work for the betterment of the future. So these are the 2-3 things, Sanjay, we have, and I can go on, but paucity of time.
Yeah, I'll come back to you with some of the use cases for this, the next round. Rahul, you're from SAP. Look, there was also a question on how MSMEs need support. And I'll narrate one story. One of my CIO friend once told me that he's having challenges in maintaining his server. So he outsourced it to the OEM. Then the OEM also were not regularly attending it. So he moved to one of the hyperscalers. Then that also didn't work. Now he's thinking of moving into another hyperscaler. So these type of situations actually creates a lot of business disruption. I'd like to hear that how an SME can go about using emerging technologies and benefit from cloud adoption.
Sure. Thanks, Sanjay, for the question, and thank you, CIA, for the opportunity. Since I represent SAP, a little bit of context, I lead marketing for SAP for the Indian subcontinent, and SAP, as you're aware, is one of the largest application providers, business application providers in the world. Almost 80% of our customers worldwide and in India are actually mid-sized customers. I wouldn't say S of the SME, but more the M of the SME. And that's the larger field of play that we operate in. But to answer your question, I think we should try and get a context of why mid-market or mid-sized companies should invest in technology. In fact, there was a very interesting study by McKinsey. I don't quite recall the timeline for it. I think about 2018 or 2019, which referred to this concept called the missing middle, okay, which since we keep hearing this 5 trillion, 10 trillion number regarding India's economy and how we'll become the third largest by 2030, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at that study, it really talks about, and if you take it in the Indian context, what it really says is that if India truly has to grow at that pace, right, become a $10 trillion in a decade or less, it will probably need 10,000 small companies to become mid-size in the next 3 or 4 years. And similarly, about 1,000 mid-sized companies to become large companies in that same time frame, right? And as it is obvious, any growth and scale at that velocity cannot happen without intervention of digital technologies, right? Because it is way too fast and the businesses become too complex too quickly to be managed through manual means. So clearly, that's a great case for why it is, digital transformation is really not a a choice or, that companies have to make. It has to be done, right? And the second, research-based input is something that comes from a research that we had commissioned in late 2021, which was like the beginning of the end of COVID, to study the sentiment of SMEs in India, basically the state of the SME market in India. And the interesting that it covered about 500 companies across several industries. And what came out was interesting. Of course, there were many other findings, but in the context of this question, almost 74% of the respondents said they will move their critical business applications to the cloud in the next couple of years, okay? It's already a couple of years since the research was done. And the reasons they cited, obviously one at that point was agility, and what that meant was to achieve the ability to be able to react to dynamic changes that are taking place in the marketplace, COVID being the backdrop for it, and we saw the kind of disruption. So the general belief is that technology, and especially cloud-based technologies, would give them the ability to adapt quickly to changes. And second, of course, is visibility, which is getting a single version of the truth from across various functions within the company, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third, of course, was affordability, and I say this in the context of total cost of ownership, in the context of cloud again, where even mid-size or smaller companies do not need to invest in expensive IT infrastructure or specialized teams to manage the systems. So clearly there is, those were the three reasons that they actually cited. And the other, like every technology, and I think Nachiket mentioned how in the beginning how technologies go through that life cycle where in the beginning it is meant only for a very small group of people, for very specialized use cases, almost an elitist beginning to all the major technologies, right from the internet, and then we saw mobile telephony, and all of these, by the way, have had, I think, transformative impact on India, right? I mean, only 1% of Indians had access to the landline telephone, right? And look at today. And of course, what we're going through or were going through or still going through is the cloud revolution, right? Which I believe is another leveler in many ways, because unlike in the on-premise era, it was really the big boys who could afford that technology, but today it is the same technology available to everybody. So your question of whether they have access, I think, yes, they have access. We can always have conversations around, is it affordable or not? But clearly, I think that has been, technology to a great extent. One, of course, it has been commoditized and consequently democratized, right, as a result of cloud. So clearly, and the final comment I would make is, another trend that we all see is the no-code, low-code, model, which allows even smaller companies to develop or extend their applications quickly on the fly without having very specialized, expensive skill sets.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. Actually, you brought a very nice, the best concept, the low code, no code, where actually people today are doing apps on the fly for any survey or any customer interactions. And that's a great way of doing it. Nachiket, coming back to you, look, you said the costs have come down, the S curve, and also it's a commodity today. But there are also do's and don'ts in that. Is it that we can jump into it? What are the guidance that you suggest for adoption of cloud and other technologies?
Absolutely, Sanjoy. I mean, the easy answer is to jump in with both feet. I think one thing you need to recognize, and all of us need to recognize, is that technology, when I said with the waves coming in, with the adoption, the speed of adoption, with the costs going down and accessibility, our legislative frameworks are still very much in catch-up mode. So a lot of the technology adoption needs to be done, cautiously by the organization as opposed to being what we're typically used to, which is a rule of law or a governance or a legislation telling us what to do or what not to do. And I'll give you examples, right? I mean, for example, the whole area of copyright today. And data is so important and integral to the AI engines, but who owns the data? I mean, you're learning and making money on the back of somebody else's work. I mean, there's a group of authors, very famous ones, that are now suing ChatGPT saying, hey, you are learning on the back of our work, right? So that's one important thing. I mean, the other thing is simple things like, the ethics of the rules you put into, say, an autonomous vehicle. I mean, if an autonomous vehicle is driving and there's a mechanical failure, and there's the option to hit an old person, a bus full of school children, or drive off a bridge and kill the rider, who takes that decision to decide what action is taken by the vehicle? Right? I mean, security. As more and more devices, organizations get connected, you create more and more vulnerabilities in terms of other people, good actors, bad actors, being able to access your landscape, right? And honestly, we are still in a lot of ways in the mode of self-governance. So one of the things you have to take into consideration as you look at adoption of technology for your organization is, are you operating in a gray area, and are you cognizant of if legislation changes or otherwise where you are? I think that's one part of it, right? The other part of it is clearly in terms of, technology is a means to an end. It can intimidate as well as overwhelm. I mean, there are so many changes that are happening and are coming at you, and all these groups or otherwise saying, hey, this company has done this and this company has done that, and this is a disruptor, and if you stand still, you're going to get disrupted. But you have to be therefore clear in terms of what is the business problem you're trying to solve. Because it's very easy to get tempted into chasing something without really addressing or solving the problem that's most relevant or important to you, right? And so again, right, I mean, moving things to the cloud may not solve your problem, because if you don't consider the fact now that your data is somewhere far away, your user is maybe half a world away, and you haven't upgraded your network that connects your data to your user, it doesn't matter that your data is in the cloud. At the end of the day, you're not solving the problem of the business user that you have, which is they need access to data instantly. Right? So again, right, I would go back to 2 points over here in terms of adoption. One is understand that the landscape in terms of rules, regulations, etc., is evolving, and you have to factor that grayness into your decision making. And the second is be very, very clear on the problem you're trying to solve, because if you don't work backwards from what the issue is and take it all the way down the technology stack to make sure that every bit of the stack is working with cohesion and unison, you will end up with a problem. So just my thoughts.
The grayness and the risks are the two important things that we need to be aware of, and more regulations in terms of DPDP and others are coming up to protect, but ultimately it's a contract that saves you. Now coming to you, Sridhara, you started some use cases and how really we can, is it real? Is OpenAI real?
Thanks, Sanjay. That's a very good, might be $1 million question. But let me first give a reflection in 3 different ways. As I said earlier, everything is mathematics. If you start looking at simple mathematics in terms of discrete scenarios, you have different data, right? Today, the biggest challenge for CIOs, and especially I will address towards the manufacturing, and what my team is developing. So based on that in a practical way, even after this session, I can actually demonstrate and show you how this reflection really brings the value, especially on the cost factor. So looking at this union of sets, the data becomes a very integral part because heterogeneous data is something which is floating around everywhere, right? You have it in your line of business, it can be cross-functional, etc. So when you create a superset data, how do you really manage the data quite well? And what do you really understand from the data? What do you really get the information from the data? So LLMs is one way is a very static information. Basically, you have millions of non-software related information such as documents, blogs, articles, white papers. And you have transactions, etc., etc., etc. It will go to millions of them. So if you create a fabric, and that fabric actually kind of takes care of in the context, that's what we are doing in Oracle is last 40 years as a data company, now we're into the cloud, now we're into emerging technologies, and we are working very closely with Cohere. Cohere is like OpenAI. We are using all their APIs, like text summarization, text context, semantic generation, etc. So the biggest challenge comes is that superset data, which is a simple mathematical model, but if you reflect that into a context to neural networks, which is a little bit complicated to understand for a normal person, what is really neural networks means, and what is really happening in today's world. I will correlate this to several use cases. So let me first get into the healthcare scenario. We acquired a company called, we are working very closely on two aspects of it. One is the healthcare, which we did acquisition. And Cerner. The Cerner is a very big healthcare company. And in the similar way, one of the use cases manufacturing in terms of scenarios about how the impact analysis can be done, how anomaly detection can be done, etc. Anomalies means you start finding out in millions of transaction scenarios issues, and how do you really rectify? That cannot be done by human. It is next to impossible because end of the day, as I said, if you take a whiteboard and start writing a simple mathematical algorithm, and that algorithm should reflect by taking the scale. So when I was working in Aadhaar with Dr. Pramod Verma, we are the first set of folks when we were invited actually to a lot of people from Google, Amazon. I was working for CA Technologies, and we were 8 to 9 people in 2008 started understanding how do we really work and create something like a social security scenario for India. And people used to laugh at us and say, you know what, this will not happen, this might not really come up, etc. Today, Aadhaar is the primary identification for every citizen, right? Anywhere you go, starting from the integration factor to the data to all the way. Similarly, this technologies also takes some time for people to understand what does it really reflects and what does it really give the value for that. So considering the healthcare, one of the biggest use cases is about doctors. So when the doctors today, and you have seen the health system, today health system is very homogeneous. That means you go into one vertical of your hospitals and the other hospital doesn't really communicate to each other because the patient's information is very secured. They don't want to share. But imagine about people going through almost out of 10 people, 8 to 9 people have issues. And when they move from one hospital to another hospital, the biggest challenge comes in is if a patient requires to go for a surgery, how fast the doctors could actually analyze the data from the last 20 years of this patient or 10 years of the patient, even if the data is available for 3 to 4 years. How does these data pipelines can be interconnected and create this superset data? So one way it helps is using the large language model. Other one is basically you take anything related to RAG, which is very important, retrieval augmented generation. Basically, you would start looking at semantic scenarios, the behavioral aspect of this data. What happens if this patient has a cancer? Not every patient behaves the same for that particular set of disease. So every patient is very unique. The surgeons which really go and sit and start doing the surgery has to understand the behavioral aspect, the impact of what can happen, how it is. So we try to do the predictive analysis about if this happens, this is what the impact is. So this is one of the very good examples, and it is being implemented. It is happening in India itself. Many of the hospitals are doing that. Second thing is a very good example of what airline industry, I will say, which is common to everybody. Like you take either the Airbus or any of these aircrafts. Today, even including the automobile, is very well equipped with the scenarios about what can happen, how it can happen. A typical example is even a Boeing A380, when it takes off from the runway, the pilot or the first officers, etc., is all preloaded scenarios about the routes. Basically, the flight plan doesn't change unless otherwise natural calamities like weather condition changes. So imagine about the data set coming from the weather information, coming from the base station about the routing patterns of the aircraft, and also the health of the aircraft. Even if there is a small issue happening in the aircraft, it has to do a resiliency pattern. That means it has to auto-recover itself. So that cannot be next to impossible if we start looking at, okay, let me manually go ahead and fix the issues. That cannot happen because you are in 30 to 40,000 feet level above the ground. And the most important thing is it has to make the call. The only way pilots get involved is if there is a situations where they take off and landing, and there are scenarios where they need to really change the route, then they go and look at the base stations and do that kind of assessment and do the scenario. So this particular use case also, we have done it. We have done very effectively. And the third one, which basically very interesting to all of you.
For time, we will discuss it offline.
Sure.
Now the question to Trideep is that, how secure are we? Or how secure is security in cloud?
I think that's a couple of $1 billion question. But what we believe in Cisco is that what's connected needs to be protected. So let me give some examples before Sanjay, I get to the point. The threat platform or the threat area has been increasing by leaps and bounds. There are so many different. When I spoke about this inclusion, more and more people coming into this connected network makes so much difficult for them to stay protected, because that's the threat area which is sort of increasing, whether it is financial sector, whether it is government, there's something called, I don't know if you know, Ayushman Bharat, where, every citizen gets connected and there is a, Ayushman Bharat card where your health data gets stored. A couple of months back, in government, some of the leading hospital in Delhi got, attacked, and it was in the newspaper constantly, for 3 or 4 days. Some of the premium education institutes have been, attacked in Mumbai and in Delhi. Some of them were in news, some of them were not in news. But with the brightest minds in the country, these also leads to these kind of threat perception, not only within the country, but also from outside the country. And for a country for the size of India, with 1.3, 1.4 billion people, it becomes so much difficult. So I think for every organization and individuals, whether it's government or private sector, I think it is very, very important to understand these vulnerabilities and build efficiencies and defense around that. I mean, there are thousands of tools which sort of, helps you to stay protected, but I think most important framework is to know what those vulnerabilities are and then build a plan around it. I mean, we can talk for hours, but I think we are in shortage of time. But I think it's most important thing is to build a framework to know these vulnerabilities and sort of build those protection with firewall, so many other products. And one thing that I just want to touch upon before I pass it on is skilling. I think every individual needs to be skilled to know these vulnerabilities. In Cisco, we have something called NetAcad, where we are training people in the villages. But that's very, very important, to stay skilled.
Yeah, skilling and awareness is the two big things that helps you in preventing an attack. Mr. Otoki, if you can just share one use case that you have implemented in Japan.
Okay. I would like to introduce Kinton. It's a low-code platforms. Business management solution we offer. Kinton is a customizable workplace platform that organizes your team data, workflow, and conversational in one centralized place for more streamlined our experience. We have successfully implemented Kinton across many different companies, and they all have benefited hugely from it. One business case I want to talk about is when we implemented Kinton at Seiko watch company. Before Kinton, it used to take Seiko staff and necessary a large amount of time to manual management their inventory. When product was one of stock, the first thing they had to do was writing on order form by hand and take a picture of the smartphone. Then they send a picture to the headquarter office. Yeah, and it was print out. Yeah, after that, to actually place the order, another person has to transfer the information from the printout to yet another order form. Yeah, the whole process took considerable time and effort and left plenty of room the mistake along with way. Yeah, the quality of their business improved thanks Kinton the sales report function, which allowed them to analyze their data in real time. Yeah, also, now that sales staff spend less time placing orders and more time with customers, yeah, their sales have increased. Yeah. It's not just about managing inventory in stores. They can also instantly gather catalog and search through sales data. Will optimize their inventory levels. On top of regular sales report, they can now easily and quickly create report, which include an in-depth analysis, such as information exchange, has been greatly improved.
Prashanjit, if you can enumerate one of the high impact where these technologies can be helpful.
Thanks, Sanjay. Yeah, I've been getting indications from Sumit out there, so I know time is short. So on the application side, yesterday my colleague Shekhar has spoken a lot on the innovation side and from the Indian sector. So I'll just pick up something from the globally. So Entity has partnered with Tour de France. Okay, this is one of the most prestigious and the biggest cycling events, where basically what we're doing is we're creating a data-driven and immersive fan experience. Okay, what we're using technologies such as cloud, IoT, AI, and ML. Okay, and we are collecting, analyzing, and visualizing real-time data pertaining to what's happening in the particular race. So it could be in terms of speed, it could be in terms of distance, it could be in terms of the position of the riders. Okay, and what we're doing is we're collecting data from the edge, which literally means that we are collecting data from the sensors which are fitted at the back of the saddles of each of the riders. Okay. Entity has created a data platform which became the foundation of Tour de France. And one of the biggest things that has happened is we've actually created the world's largest connected platform or stadium, basically because of this, where we are collecting data from real time as well as data which is coming from insights and AI. We also created a digital platform where the users can actually interact with people on the ground. They can do an interactive feed, they can do insights, they can take part in any social media feeds. So it's a multiple platform that we created using the emerging technologies, Sanjay.
Yep. Thanks. And Rahul, any real life example where transformation has been attended at
I
scale?
thought what I will do is, given that we are a business application provider,
Yeah,
I thought
sure.
I'll just touch upon our AI strategy. So basically what SAP is doing is we are embedding AI into every single of our application areas. And what that means is that it will completely, one, of course, we help companies do the simple things better, right? So if you look at HR or our success factors, talent management suite, for example, things like your resume matching or writing up JDs to to basically the onboarding experience for new joinees, etc. All of that is kind of getting transformed because of the embedded AI in the system itself. Of course, areas like the cloud ERP solution itself, I think the first low-hanging fruits is document processing, right? Which is a simple but time-consuming task, right? A truck full of raw materials arrives into your factory. It takes too much time to just to process those documents. That is being simplified, for instance. And I'm just talking about things that are happening right now, okay? And of course, we spoke about the low-code, no-code development platform, which is allowing, obviously, people to auto-write code, for example, right? So those are things that are happening. And just last night, we announced our first natural language co-pilot, which is embedded across all our solution areas. So it will fundamentally transform how almost 300 million SAP users across the world will interact with the system or query the system. So it is voice-based and in multiple languages. So if you're in Japan, you're doing that in Japanese in completely human fashion.
Thank you. We have a time for question or no? Okay. One question. Okay, we can meet offline because we are running out of time. They will be available. I want to thank each and every participant from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out and coming down to address us. I learned a lot. I hope you guys also did the same thing. Thank you. Look, there will be a technology clinic now. After this session is over, please attend this with all your questions and queries. Thanks.
Thank you, Sanjay. Before we close the session, we have a few mementos to hand over. So I would request you to kindly hand over to Nachiket Suktankar. Thank you, Nachi, for being here. So may I request you to kindly hand over to Srid. Thank you so much. Then to Mr. Sridip Roy. Thank you so much for coming. And Mr. Otokai Ogura. Thank you, sir, for coming all the way from Japan to be with us today. To Mr. Proshenjit Roy. Thank you, Proshenjit. And Mr. Rahul Singh. Thank you, Rahul. And may I request a chairman to kindly hand over a memento to co-chairman. Acha, you have already got one, right? So with this, I would request everyone to be seated because we'll quickly move to the next session. Towards excellence through use of trusted, secured, and easy-to-use data. So which is very important now. And so we have all the senior dignitaries who have come to address us today. So can we have, again, we'll just take 1 minute to just kind of set up the